communities and across Perth and Kinross, and identifies areas for continued development and improvement. Pardon me. Thanks also to the performance staff who've collated and analysed all this information, and it provides us with a very detailed and informative assessment of our performance. Happy to commend the paper.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Provost. This is a very positive report. It demonstrates successful progress with the overwhelming majority of key performance indicators improving. Highlights include the reduction in homeless presentation since 2015 and the impact of our Home First rapid rehousing model, which has made a huge difference to people made homeless, reducing lengths of stays in temporary accommodation from over a year to around 3 to 4 months, more than halving the numbers of people waiting on settled accommodation from 550 to 218. Members will be aware of the savings realised in our spend on temporary accommodation, which has fallen by around £4 million. The real difference and importance of such transformation is the impact on people's lives, providing them with a home and support to sustain their home, to build their future lives, improve their mental health and family relationships, their children's education and attainment. The fact is that we as a council have understood the importance of tackling homelessness for a long time, and concerted action over that period has put us in the position today where we're recognised as leading the way in Scotland on rapid rehousing. Provost, housing's contribution to improving outcomes in Perth and Kinross is clearly documented throughout this report, whether that's the delivery of affordable homes and exceeding our target for those new homes, accelerating the programme of council house buybacks and working to bring more empty properties back into use. It's demonstrated in the numbers of adaptations in over 300 council houses to enable people to continue to live as independently as possible in their own homes, and in the 2,401 adaptations carried out, in fact I think that should be 241, 241 adaptations carried out through care and repair, which support hospital discharge and care in our community. It's demonstrated in the work that we're doing to minimise rent arrears arising from the rollout of universal credit through an integrated approach, working with both our locality and welfare teams and alongside partners such as the Citizens Advice Bureau. The performance report illustrates the difference that we're making to reduce fuel poverty, improve energy efficiency and cut carbon consumption, with almost 700 new fuel-efficient central heating systems, over 500 houses receiving thermally efficient triple glazed windows, and another 200 houses fitted with external wall insulation, and 367 houses where failed cavity wall insulation has been extracted and refilled to improve the heat retention to those homes. 82 homes were connected to the gas grid, providing those households with far more affordable energy. Provost, I commend the performance report to this council, and I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Are there any comments on the report? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Provost. I don't want to detract from what I think is an excellent report, but may I make a comment that my attention is always drawn in papers like this to the words need attention and similar words. And in the covering paper, it says 3 areas need attention. I would have thought it might be reasonable to specify those areas in the covering report, rather than having to sort of search for them, which indeed I did. But it strikes me that areas that are likely to attract comment might be highlighted in the covering paper. Thanks very much.
Yeah, thank you. Noted. Any other comments? Councillor Lang.
Thanks, Provost. Thanks, Provost. I think it's a fantastic report, and everybody should take that and be proud of it, all the officers and all the work that's gone into that. And I know that we'll address any of the areas that need to be addressed. Going back to our earlier motion about Brexit, I note that our unemployment level is 1.1%. I don't think we've got a lot of capacity for fulfilling any job vacancies if that's our unemployment level.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Do we agree with the report? Thank you. Item 9, Treasury Activity and Compliance Report, first quarter. With Stuart Mackenzie again.
Thank you, Provost. This report advises Council of Treasury activity undertaken for the quarter ended 30th of June 2018. The bank rate remained unchanged during the quarter, but as members will be aware, the Monetary Policy Committee voted to increase the rate from 0.5% to 0.75% on the 2nd of August. The Public Works Loans Board rates, which largely determine the Council's borrowing costs, did, however, reduce notably at the end of May. One new fixed-rate loan of £10 million was taken out from the PWLB in line with the requirement of the capital programme. This was borrowed on the 31st of May for a period of 50 years at 2.25%. Overall, the Council's long-term debt increased from £354 million to £364 million during the quarter. Average interest on this debt reduced from 3.32% to 3.29%, equivalent to a saving of approximately £100,000 per annum. Investment activity was undertaken in accordance with the Council's cash flow requirements. The total level of investments increased from 37.6 million to 51.3 million over the quarter, in part due to the new borrowing. But the average interest generated on investments reduced marginally from 0.735% to 0.72%. There were no breaches in compliance with approved Treasury and investment policy during the quarter, and all prudential indicators remain within approved limits. Happy to take questions, Provost.
Thank you, Stuart. Any questions on the report? Councillor Dugan.
Thank you, Provost. The head of the council's head of finance indicated in his introduction about the levels of long-term debt, and these are reflected in page 322 of the report, very clearly, particularly and including rather the interest rates that accrue to that debt. I wonder if the council's head of finance could indicate where Perth and Kinross sits in a relative sense, maybe not precisely on a league table, but just in a narrative sense, where Perth and Kinross sits in terms of its level of indebtedness.
Thank you, Councillor Dugan, for your question. I don't have any detailed statistical analysis, but based on the work that we've undertaken previously, around about somewhere in the middle.
Any other questions? Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Provost. The head of finance referred to the loan taken out at the end of May for 10 million, and we now have 320 million with the Public Works Loan Board. Could I just ask, first of all, the head of finance, maturity of that? Is most of that debt now between 30 and 50 years, and that we have very limited rollover risk? I want to follow up with one point. It's just that we don't now show, or seem to show, a breakdown.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson, for your question. We could include the analysis, if that would be helpful, in the Treasury report. We have a mix of debt, but yes, because an awful lot of our debt is with PWLB and a lot of the attractive rates now over the longer term, then it's beginning to shift to the longer term in terms of debt. But we're quite happy to include that in analysis if that would help.
Could I do just a follow-up? That would be helpful, because I think any fixed income manager, fixed income portfolio, it is helpful to know your redemption periods. And I get the feeling that we're probably 70%, perhaps more, over 30 years. And that's quite important in terms of planning ahead. The more broader question I'd like to ask you, though, is this. In the previous administration, we moved to a lot of capitalisation of projects. Now, obviously, that feeds through to the revenue budget. Unfortunately, we have a unified budget next February. But nonetheless, at such low interest rates, what scope do we still have for capitalising projects, or is that an avenue that's now largely been exhausted?
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Some of my colleagues will appreciate the irony of what I'm about to say, because it is a moot point amongst officers. The accounting regulations limit what we can capitalise, so we've pretty much capitalised everything we can do.
Okay, Councillor Parrott. Sorry, you've had a question, Councillor
Oh,
Parrott.
sorry.
Anybody else? Okay, I think we'll just, Councillor Lyle, move the report. I'm sorry, Councillor Lang, I've looked, there was nobody else putting their hand up. I can ask Councillor Lyle, and suddenly you're jumping up again. I'd love to be quicker.
Thank you, Provost. Apologies, Councillor Lane. Provost, in line with good practice, this report sets out Treasury management activity and compliance from the 1st of April 18 to the 30th of June 18. The report sets out in detail the proactive Treasury management activity undertaken in the first quarter of this financial year. I am pleased to note that there are no breaches in compliance with our Treasury policies and that our capital programme remains affordable, prudent and sustainable over the medium term. Provost, I'm happy to move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Barrett, second.
Thank you, Provost. Just very briefly, Provost, once again, our Treasury Activity and Compliance Report provides reassurance that there have been no breaches in compliance, either with Treasury limits or with regard to permitted investments and individual counterparties. Investments remained within the £70,000 boundary. The average interest rate on long-term borrowing fell by 0.03%, equivalent to £113,000 per year. Happy to second, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Are there any comments on the paper? Councillor Barrett. You didn't have your hand up, Councillor Lee.
No, because he didn't ask a question.
Thank you, Provost. If I did ask a question on this paper, I'd like to be reminded of what it was, because I don't remember it myself. However, I'll make a comment. And my comment is, against the approved investment counterparty list, I notice a large number of foreign and EU banks. I'm wondering whether we expect to see any considerable shortening of that list in the coming months. Thank you.
You'd be as well to just keep standing, Grace. Go on. Maybe you should just have nodded. Councillor Dugan.
Provost, as ever, very grateful for this report and the quality of the information therein. Of the many things that keep us awake at night in Perth Kinross Council, for the time being, finance isn't one of them, and we should be grateful for that.
Thank you, Councillor Dugan. Any other comments? Councillor Lang at the last minute again.
I'm just slow, relaxed, you see, laid back. I just found it interesting that Mr Mackenzie's comment that it was actually a saving when we borrowed 10 million more, that because the interest rate went down, that was a saving. I find it quite an interesting way to look at things.
Okay. If there are no more comments, can we agree the report? Thank you. Item 10, medium-term financial plan. Can I invite our Head of Finance again to introduce the report?
Thank you, Provost. Maybe just to address Councillor Lane's comment, I am ever the optimist. And if I can ask Council to bear that in mind in the following introduction. The report updates the Council's medium-term financial plan for the period 2019 to 2024 and builds on the plan last approved by Council in October 2017. In May 2018, the Scottish Government published Scotland's Fiscal Outlook, which sets out the implications of meeting the Government's spending priorities under different scenarios. The budget available for local government is forecast to reduce by around 8% in real terms by 2021-22, excluding ring-fenced funding for attainment and early learning. The anticipated level of Scottish Government funding in 2019-20 and 2020-21 has accordingly been revised downwards. At the same time, pressures on the Council's revenue budget continue to grow. These include increasing demand for services, cost inflation, and the potential for higher pay awards following a period of pay restraint. On this point, the Council received notification this week of a potentially substantial increase in teachers' pension costs from 2019. This reflects changes in UK Treasury assumptions on funding future pension costs and is a national issue which will be raised through COSLA. More detailed work requires to be undertaken, but the cost implications for the Council could be significant. 3 scenarios have been modelled to illustrate the potential financial challenges facing the Council. These show a cumulative savings requirement of between £10 million and £107 million, over the next 5 years, with a recommended mid-range assumption of £52 million. The range of these estimates highlights the impact that small changes in key variables, such as grant funding or pay awards, could potentially have on the revenue budget. Members will recall that in February the Council agreed provisional revenue budgets for 2019-20 and 2020-21. A number of the assumptions made at that time have subsequently been reviewed in updating this plan, and as is normal, will continue to be refined throughout the budget process. Council has asked to approve the updating of the provisional revenue budgets for 2019-20 and 2021, and the development of a provisional budget for 2021-22 based upon the revised corporate savings targets and assumptions set out in section 4 of the report. Preparing detailed budgets over the medium term supports the Council in planning to meet the challenges ahead, given the significant uncertainty reflected throughout the report. Services are required to identify measures to meet both their share of the revised corporate savings targets and their own specific pressures, including inflation and demand. Members are advised at this stage that Council has no headroom available to either reject savings proposals or fund a new expenditure. The report highlights the most significant risks in developing the Council's budget strategy. These include the lack of information on government funding beyond the current year, uncertainty over future pay awards, challenges in delivering savings, the potential impact of Brexit, and risks around demand, income generation, and changes in legislation, amongst others. The report also makes recommendations on updating the Council's 10-year composite capital budget and reserve strategy, on setting the housing revenue account and housing investment programme, and on the Council's severance scheme. Happy to take questions, Provost.
Thank you, Stuart. Any questions on the report? Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Provost. And can I just first of all, like one or two others, thank the finance team for the work they do, for the thoroughness, for the thought that's gone into the reports. I think it's outstanding. Provost, since you seem to be only taking one question per councillor per report, I'm going to confine my remarks on demographics, which are a real concern to my observations, because what I want to turn to is page 354. It's section 11.14. Now, I know the IGB are going to present to us in early November. I think it's the 5th or 6th of November, I'm not quite sure of the date. But it states, from 2019-20, the Council and NHS Tayside moved to a risk-sharing agreement whereby both partners are potentially liable to meet their respective share of any overspend on the activities under the direction of the board. What I'd like to ask is, how is that risk shared? How will it be apportioned?
Thank you. The risk-sharing agreement that's in place for Perth Kinross Council is being examined again at the moment, because we have a third year built into our scheme of integration. And the wording is that in year 3, the risk may be shared proportionally on the size of the budget. However, for this year, it continues to be based upon the health service spend and the council spend, but this is subject to our discussions at the moment.
Can I then, because we're just about to move into the budget setting process and the BRGs in November, can I ask when we're likely to get clarity on that front? Is it such a big ticket item? I think we need at least some degree of certainty going forward.
Thank you. Yes, there's going to be discussion between the chief executives and myself and the chief finance officer within days, actually.
Thank you. Any other questions? Sorry, there's Councillor Parrott.
Thank you, Provost. I'm on page 337 at paragraph 3.20. Is the exposure that we're exposed to there of being an enabler of services rather than a direct provider, is the risk that imposes for us specifically built into our planning in accordance perhaps with paragraph 3.45 and the action there? Thank you. Particularly given the light of the relatively full employment in Perth and Kinross.
Okay.
So the level of risk that we face with care at home is largely around. Sorry.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Councillor Park, for your question. As colleagues will comment, I think there are specific risks around each area of service activity, but these will be reflected on in the budget and provided for as best we can.
Any other questions? Councillor Lang.
Provost. Stuart, I was wondering how confident you are that the revision of the pay award up to 3% will be adequate or sufficient.
Thank you, Councillor Lang. Perhaps my colleague Karen Donaldson may want to comment as well. An assessment of confidence is a difficult thing when it comes to negotiations with trade unions. Thank you. Perhaps in that case, I wouldn't necessarily be overly confident. I think there's a degree of negotiation to come yet. Thank you very much. Thank you. But Karen may have some updated information. Thank you, Councillor.
Councillor, I don't have much to add because, as you know, the annual negotiations are still ongoing. However, Scottish Government are a key party in the tripartite body that looks at the pay awards for teachers, and they've already they're funding part of that pay award. And I know that there have been discussions with them to ask them to look at making up any additional costs if the pay award were to be increased, not only for teachers but for other groups, but that's still part of the discussions at national level.
Thank you, Karen. Any other questions? No. Councillor Lyle. After them. The motion's not been given yet.
Sorry, Councillor Donaldson, but hopefully you'll get your opportunity shortly. Provost, as we heard earlier today, the most recent independent examination of the Council by KPMG, our external auditors, praised the Council for its effective management of finances and its continued high standards of governance. The medium-term financial plan is integral to this effective financial management of Council resources. It sets out the broad direction of travel for the Council and includes high-level commentary on the macroeconomic conditions that may influence the public sector funding over the medium term. It also signals the formal commencement of the budget process that will see us setting a 3-year revenue budget and a 10-year capital budget in February of next year. The medium-term financial plan includes the best estimates which are currently available. These will undoubtedly be reviewed, refreshed and revised between now and February. But we are where we are, and I commend the medium-term financial plan to the Council.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Councillor Barrett to second the motion.
Thanks, Provost. The medium-term financial plan is a vital tool in the sustainable management of the Council's finances in the short and medium term, taking us beyond the Council election cycle, and frames the Council's 3-year budget setting processes. To be honest, the short and medium term outlook is bleak. The report highlights the impact of demographic changes and increasing elderly population with increasingly complex care requirements at the very eldest stages of their lives. We face significant challenges through disproportionate cuts to unprotected areas of the Scottish budgets because of the Scottish Government's spending priorities for health, the police, early learning and childcare. The Council's non-teaching functions face real terms reductions in funding of up to 16% in the worst case scenario, or 8% in the central scenario, and our share of the Scottish budget, as I mentioned previously, is falling from 43% to 37%. The impact of Brexit adds even greater uncertainty into the mix. Coupled with lower Scottish growth in the rest of the UK and a greater share of the Scottish budget arising from taxes raised in Scotland, the future sustainability of public sector finances is increasingly dependent on the performance of the Scottish economy. The Scottish budget is predicted to shrink in real terms, and local government's share of that shrinking budget is falling too. That double whammy is compounded by the 3% cap on council tax rises and the Scottish Government's reluctance to empower councils to raise revenues through other streams such as the transient visitor tax, while stoking up public sector pay expectations and inflation by setting national pay guidance and then treating public sector employees such as teachers differently. The mid-range saving scenario predicts Perth Kinross Council will have to make £52 million worth of savings, with almost half of those savings front-loaded for the next 2 years. These are not going to be easy to make. We're going to be faced once again with really unpalatable savings options and tough choices, those will be for all parties and councillors to face in agreeing a balanced budget moving forward. Happy to second, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Barrett. Are there any comments? And Councillor Dryle, I think, was first.
Thank you, Provost. Some of what I'm about to say has been covered by previous speakers, but I still want to go ahead and make this comment. I've been greatly encouraged today by our new Chief Executive's very clearly and unambiguously stated ambitions and objectives for this Council, and I'm sure these are fully shared by all elected members. At the heart of these ambitions lies the health and well-being of our population. This paper has made it clear that the figures set out in the tables within the report exclude vital health and social care services. At clause 4.5, it is, however, indicated that cost and demand pressures within health and social care are anticipated to be up by £7 million in 2019-20, and it may well be more. Provost, with a 17% projected increase in our elderly population, meaning inevitably growing pressures in future years' demand for health and social care services, and with only very limited non-statutory areas able to be looked at to find any savings, it is imperative, and I do mean imperative, that this Council fully recognises these significant pressures. I know that after some pressure put to bear, there are now plans to give all elected members a better and fuller awareness of the scale of the challenges facing the Integration Joint Board. And this exercise is to happen, as has been stated, early next month, and I'm very pleased about that. So, as we approach our next annual budget review process, I implore all elected members to keep health and social care services at the forefront of their minds and to be sure to allocate increased and sufficient funding to this vital area that affects all of us, but in particular the most vulnerable in our society. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Drysdale. Any other comments? Oh, sorry, Councillor Dugan.
Yes, thank you, Provost. It is indeed a very difficult funding situation that we find ourselves in Perth and Kinross, and indeed every local authority across the country. However, in stark contrast to Councillor Barrett's now constant carping about the Scottish Government and the funding decisions that it makes, incidentally, he should notice that even his Tory masters don't indulge in that kind of carping to the extent that he does. In contrast to that which he posits, the fact is that the funding regime across these islands is very constrained. The public finances of the United Kingdom are in dire straits, and that has to filter down into Scottish Government funding, and that has to filter down into Perth and Kinross's and the other Scottish local authorities' funding. And there's a key point in this, because even while the SNP were in administration, I encouraged officers to look south of the border to see the dynamism and enthusiasm with which local authorities in England took up the mantle and addressed the challenges of their funding settlement from the UK government. They innovated and they've changed services beyond all recognition in certain local authorities south of the border. And we as a local authority here, the pessimism I fear is accurate. We are in for a very difficult settlement. All indicators point to that. So we must use every opportunity that we can to assess in other parts of these islands, what has worked well, and crucially, what hasn't worked well. So there's no point in reinventing the wheel, as it's often said. And our new chief executive has used, on more than one occasion, the word opportunity. And I think we shouldn't lose sight of that. This is a difficult time. We will have difficult decisions to make, but we can make the best possible outcome for Perth and Kinross by seizing every available opportunity. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Councillor Dugan. Any other? Councillor Braun.
Thank you, Provost. We're now presented with another medium financial plan in preparation of another budget by this administration. It doesn't take an expert, with all due respect, to know that over the year, financial demands on our services have risen. Inflation, ongoing maintenance of our assets, and the needs of a growing population, particularly with an Asian population, all add up to an ever-increasing expenditure. So it is disappointing to see once again that in spite of this, we have to anticipate a further reduction in Scottish Government funding, even in the most optimistic scenario. Disappointing because it will put pressure on officers to find more savings. Disappointing because it will force this administration to make even harder decisions over services. Disappointing because our opposition will scream about Tory cuts when their own party is largely responsible. But the most disappointment will be for the people of Perth and Kinross. And it's not just Perth and Kinross that will suffer. No doubt this is happening to local authorities all over Scotland. And what is the Holyrood administration doing if it has to keep cutting funding to its local authorities? It is the Scottish people who suffer, often the most vulnerable. So why cut funding? Is it the simple truth that they don't have the money themselves through overspending on their own vanity projects and the mismanagement of the economy? And given the state of the economy, what can you expect? Growth in the Scottish economy is now so low that it is being dragged along on the coattails of the UK economy.
Oh, give us peace. Really?
Come on,
Hang on, guys. There's more to come. When it should be at the forefront of the UK economy, a beacon lighting the way. And why not? We have the people, the ability, the ingenuity, the talent. The only thing we lack is the government to actually do it. And what does the SNP government in Holyrood offer? Marches through the streets of Scottish cities demanding another referendum.
That's not the Scottish.
So that's all right then. That will solve everything.
Councillor, can you stick to the point and issue? Yes, indeed.
Start with you, Councillor Barrett.
Can I just stop you here? I don't like to see this catcalling going back and forward here. Can we just be, we're councillors here on behalf of our constituents. Just cool it, please.
And what about here and now? This administration, with the help of officers, will always aim to provide the best services to the people of Perth and Kinross. And if savings have to be made, then yes, we'll take the flak, we'll take the blame and the knocks, but people are starting to see the truth. They know where the problem lies. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Provost, thank you. I'm not going to make a speech, just some observations after the...
Councillor Donaldson, could you put your microphone on, please?
After the remarks from Councillor Braun, I'm only going to make some comments rather than a speech. But I would want to turn, first of all, to page 333.2.22, where it states quite clearly, and that's right, the Scottish Government has only set a one-year budget for 2018-19 and has indicated that this will be the same for 2019-2020. What they seem to forget is the Scottish Government is a minority government. To get its budget through, it requires compromise, the support possibly of Greens, perhaps even of some individual Scot Lib Dem MSPs. Then again, maybe not. But what's also important is what's stated here is it will be the same for 2019-2020, and then, unless there is confirmation of future funding levels from the UK government's spending review. And I think the thing that's got to be remembered is still around 50% of the Scottish Government's budget is dependent on Barnett consequentials. And that's a key thing to remember. And it is constrained in a lot of what it can do. The other points I want to make are, one is on demographics. and I think this is really important. I seem to recall when I joined this council nearly 18 months ago in May last year, the projected growth in the population in Perth and Kinross was of the order of 13% by 2025, 2026. Looking at the briefing paper that was produced by Scott Walker for the medium-term financial plan, that figure is now 4.5%. I think that's a massive variation in the figures. I think it's something I'd have liked to see more on at the full council in December. But now on that and on other Brexit consequentials, we're now just being told that the work the council does will be shared with council, the Cannes residents in due course. And I just don't think that's good enough. The IJB, Councillor Drysdale's referred to, I think we do need greater clarity here, because we saw from the revenue monitoring budget that on core services of the council, there's likely to be a further underspend this year. But it's on the IJB. We need to pin down what the position is, both this year and going forward. And my final point, and I'll come back to it again, is on the Taste Cities deal. And we just wonder how these negotiations are going on. We heard at the last Strategic Policy and Review Committee that negotiations were intensifying. It's now, I think, some 28 weeks since we were told that the Taste Cities deal was just about to be up and running, heads of terms of agreement were going to be in place. And we're still waiting, and we do need that certainty on various projects here in Perth and Kinross, and for the benefit of our people. And so I'd be interested to know just how the negotiations are proceeding. Let us hear.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Purvis, please.
Thank you, Provost. I'd just like to agree with some of the comments made by Councillor Dugan in terms of looking at examples of best practice from other areas across the United Kingdom, particularly when we are faced with very challenging budget situations. At our party conference just a few days ago, Councillor Stewart and I attended an event hosted by the New Local Government Network, which is a voluntary organisation of councils, 50 councils from England and Wales, currently chaired by Wigan Council. And it seeks a culture shock across the UK in terms of how local government operates, and have proposed some very new, radical and innovative ideas of how it might change service delivery, how we can deliver better quality services for less. So I think that building on the success of this council in terms of successful delivery of transformation programmes, that might be something that perhaps we could be the first Scottish local authority to engage with a network like that.
Thank you, Councillor Purvis. Councillor Rivett, please.
Thank you, Provost. I'll be brief because we are here to serve the constituents of Perth and Kinross. However, it is worth remembering the Scottish Government has no borrowing capacity, very limited tax-raising powers. Regrettably, the size of our cake is not decided here, it's decided elsewhere, i.e. London. And if our slice of that cake is getting smaller, it's firmly at the door of Tory mismanagement down there.
Thank you. Councillor Lane, please.
Thanks, Provost. I wasn't going to be saying anything to this paper, but I have to respond to Councillor Braun. Councillor Braun, who I have a lot of time for. I don't believe he even wrote that speech. I think I don't even know if he believes it, but never mind. The point of that is we have to put our confidence in the administration here. This is the same administration that can only get 80% of their members to turn up to represent their communities at a full council because they've decided to go on holiday instead. So that doesn't give that's disrespectful to you, Provost, disrespectful to the council, disrespectful to the people of Perth and Kinross. So I wouldn't be thinking that as we move forward at difficult times, hopefully they'll turn up.
Thank you. Councillor McDade.
Thank you, Provost. be very quick. I would like to support the comments of Councillor Dugan and those of Councillor Purvis and show that there is cross-party support, I believe, for a widespread look at how we can change the delivery of services in these challenging times, regardless of where the money is coming from. We all know it's going to be a difficult situation, and I think that it's in the best interest of the people of Perth and Kinross that as councillors we work together about how we can restructure those services and transform them so that they continue to provide the excellent level of care that we're looking for.
Thank you, Councillor McDade. I'm going to suggest, do we agree the report?
Agreed.
Thank you. I'm going to suggest that we have a 10-minute break to have take a deep breath. Guess who's last to sit down? Oh no, it's not. It's not you, Fiona. We thought it was the Chief Executive. I've lost a brownie point there. Right. That was a good answer. Okay, thank you, folks. I think we were needing a wee break. Item 11, Perth and Kinross Child Protection Committee Standards and Quality Report 2017. I would like to welcome back former Council Officer Bill Atkinson, who is now the independent chairman of the Perth and Kinross Child Protection Committee, to the meeting, and to invite him to introduce the report.
Thanks very much, Provost and councillors, for warm welcome, and I'm absolutely delighted to be back here in this capacity of Chair of the Adult and Child Protection Committee. I look forward to working with you over the next 3 years in relation to improving the lives of vulnerable people in Perth and Kinross. I know an issue from the past which has been high up in your top priorities of actions. So what I'm proposing to do, just very briefly, is introduce the next 3 papers, which are bringing together child protection and adult protection, and proposing that we have a look at these issues on at least an annual basis. The first one, therefore, paper 11, is the Standards and Quality Report for 2017-18. And this provides an overview of the activities of the Child Protection Committee from August to July 18, and hopefully provides reassurance about the performance across the services and to the extent which they are protecting children and young people here in Perth and Kinross. I hope you will see that there's an extensive programme of quality assurance and self-evaluation activity, and that allows us to set out the achievements and identify the key strengths and also the areas for improvement. As you will know, in April 2018, the Care Inspectorate concluded that the business model for the Child Protection Committee was worthy of publication as national good practice. And I therefore would want to acknowledge the outstanding leadership of Jackie Pepper as the previous chair of the Child Protection Committee, and Ross Drummond as her lead officer in achieving that recognition, and look forward to working with Jackie and Ross over my period of tenure. So the report provides a detailed, comprehensive picture, I hope, of the Child Protection Committee and its work over the last year. And I would be happy to take any questions or try to answer them, but I suspect that Jackie and indeed Ross might be in a better position than me to do that, given their very recent involvement in the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Are there any questions on the report? Councillor Roberts and Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost, and it's very nice to see you standing there once again. Bill, it's good to have you back in the chamber. Could I ask you about the actual report itself? On I think it's page 332, it's there's a number of areas of concern. Could you just talk us through those and just, it's quite self-explanatory, but I mean, just talk us through what these areas of concern mean. Do you find where I am? It's that page there. It's actually the report. I'm going by what I've got in the, it's 332 in my pack. And it doesn't have, it's table number 12 in the actual report. No, it's actually figure number 12 in the report. 391. There you go.
I'm sure Jackie and Ross will want to comment. Really what that's trying to do is to identify, in each case we look at what is the predominant area of concern that's been identified in the assessment, the risk assessment of the child within the family situation. And it's trying to identify what are the areas that have been identified in that family. So what it's showing over a period of a number of years, for example, whether there's been an increase in families affected by parental mental health, and that's been a problem in assessing the risk of the child, whether there's been neglect and whether that's a rising trend or a levelling trend or a decreasing trend. And it just tries to put together a picture of what are the areas that we need to focus on in terms of the work that we're doing with families, and to target those areas that we have identified are one of the concerns which are reaching the conclusion or affecting the conclusion that these children are at risk in some way. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Jack.
Just to add that these categories are actually set nationally. Previously there were categories of registration, so for example children would be on the Child Protection Register under the category of physical, being at risk of physical abuse or sexual abuse, but this was an attempt to try and find out what were the kind of key features that were contributing to those risks. So they're set nationally, and it's the chairperson of the Child Protection Conference that would identify that when they're considering the case.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor McCall.
Thank you, Provost. My question relates to the next page, 392, regarding the increase for the second year of reports to the Scottish Children's Reporter. Now, I do note that in page 374 of the report 1.9 that you're looking to examine these trends at the next meeting. But I was just wondering if you could give us an indication on what your thought processes were. Could it be down to just an increase in reporting? Could it be down to the fact that the police are doing a better job on that particular area? Can you just have an indication of where you seem to think it might be?
I'm going to ask Hazel Robertson as Head of Services for Children and Young People and Families to comment on that, because Hazel has a responsibility for ongoing negotiation and links with the local reporter.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting point to note. SCRA are very happy with the level of referrals and the conversion rate from the number of referrals to the Reporters Administration, and the conversion to numbers of hearings for Perth and Kinross is very high. Nationally it's 20% and Perth and Kinross it's 60%. So they feel we are referring the right children for the right reasons, and that there is genuine concern. I think the reason for the rise is quite difficult to explain in isolation. I mean, I think we see growing complexity. So, I mean, there are a number of families who are experiencing a number of issues that are raising concern for all of the partners, and because that's not diminishing over time, and there's not an opportunity to have a hearing, perhaps, that the grounds are not established for the reporter, these children are staying on the register longer also. So that will account for some of the other statistics too.
Thank you, Jackie. Councillor Baird.
Thank you, Provost. My question is on page 5, and it relates to one of the areas for improvement. I'd like some more information about the independent advocacy so that children get their voices. Thank you.
A number of things that we could say. Certainly, as I think you'll see from the report, one of the focuses of the Development Day for the Child Protection Committee this year was around how we can involve greater participation of children and their families in all aspects of Child Protection Committee work. And indeed, Ross and myself and others were meeting yesterday to see how we could take that forward, because a number of young people representing different groups had quite strong views about how we could engage better with them. Advocacy is one particular aspect of that, which is about how children's views are represented in the child protection arena, both at meetings and in other decision-making forums where discussions take place about what's the best way to support and protect those children. We are looking at the moment at whether we could continue to develop the relationships that we have with the local advocacy schemes, and certainly we have representation on the Child Protection Committee and have had, I think, for some time now with the local advocacy service. You'll note when we come on to the adult protection report in a few minutes' time, there's also a reference there to trying to improve the whole question of how we can ensure that people who are attending our meetings have an opportunity to have their voice heard in whatever circumstances there are. So it is an area that we will certainly be working on. It's an area that's been identified by one of the improvement areas by the Care and Spec earlier. What
Thank you, Provost. I'm going back to page 391 or 12, which is the areas of concern. And I'm looking at the tables here, and I see there's quite a significant increase in parental mental health throughout the years, where emotional abuse and non-engaging families has dropped. Is this because we're using a different method of recognising, and perhaps some of these other ones, it's been moved across the categories because we're actually taking on board parental mental health rather than putting them in the other classifications? Is there any connection, in other words?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Anderson. I think that the understanding of the impact of parental mental ill health or experiences such as low mood and the impact on children is better understood. I think in terms of non-engaging families, there has been for quite a number of years some well-attended training opportunities for staff across partners to understand what might lie behind that and how they can tackle that and work more effectively with families. So I think this is an indication that that's actually working. So I think the understanding of parental mental ill health and the prevalence of that is certainly being shown in these figures. Yeah.
Thank you. If there are no more questions, I'll ask Councillor Lyle to move the report.
Thank you very much, Provost. Elected members, senior officers, the Child Protection Committee and partner agencies are committed to working together tirelessly to safeguard children and young people, to protect them from harm, from abuse and from exploitation. We have a shared and compelling vision that our children and young people will be safe and protected from harm at home, at school and in the communities around Perth and Kinross. This annual Standards and Quality Report sets out clearly that the Child Protection Committee is ably demonstrating continuous, sustained improvement in the fulfilment of its key functions in the protection of children and young people. A calendar of self-evaluation and coordinated continuous improvement is leading to positive impacts, and children and young people are assisted to have the knowledge and skills they need to keep themselves safe at home, at school, and in the community. For those who may be at risk, services are quickly working together effectively to keep them protected. Mr. Bill Atkinson was successfully appointed as independent chair of the CPC and the Adult Protection Committee, bringing a wealth of experience in community planning, children's services and child protection, and his appointment will secure greater synergy between child and adult protection locally. The extensive work of the Child Protection Committee was rated by the Care Inspectorate as sector leading and a model of its type in Scotland during the previous inspection of services, and these were published in just April 18. This report demonstrates that the drive for continuous improvement in the arrangements for keeping children and young people safe in Perth and Kinross is continuing. It's my pleasure to move this report.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Can I ask Councillor Shires to second the motion?
Provost, the partnership working of council officers, the Child Protection Committee, elected members from across this council chamber and our partner agencies ensures we do currently and will continue to work together to safeguard children and young people across Perth and Kinross, to protect them from harm, abuse and exploitation. Back in April, when we discussed the report of the inspectors, I said that as lifelong learning convener, I wanted to ensure we continue to build on the excellent inspection report and not at all be complacent. And this standard and qualities report sets out clearly how the Child Protection Committee is ably demonstrating continuous sustained improvement through self-evaluation and open, honest discussions between all partners. This is part of the business of this council that, on behalf of all children and young people, we should never ignore, and ensure that our messages of it's everyone's job to make sure I'm all right and see something, say something, become more than just words. I particularly welcome the appointment of Bill Atkinson as chair. Bill's well known to many of us and importantly knows Perth and Kinross extremely well, and he brings with him a huge amount of experience to the role, which is very welcome. I'm happy to second the report.
Thank you, Councillor Shires. Are there any comments on the report? Councillor Rebick, Councillor Band.
Thank you, Provost. I think it's worth remembering that for all our talk about money and finance, which of course is very important, that financial prudence is only a means to an end, and that end allows the council, us as elected members and officers, to do the kind of stuff that's described in these papers, and it's actually the most important thing we do as a council, and I think it's worth remembering that. Two things that have occurred to me as a lay member sitting in these committees, sitting in the young people's committees and indeed the corporate parenting committee, that strike me is the dedication of our officers, which sounds glib, but it's clearly not just a job to them. They actually do really care. And also the collaboration that we have as a council with other organisations, third-party sectors, is crucial in keeping complacency away from the door, and I'd just like to commend the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rebick. I think we would all agree with your sentiments. Councillor Band.
Thank you, Provost. I had not intended to speak to you today, but it's now something like 11 years since I first became...
Councillor Band, can you put your microphone on, please?
It keeps going off again. It seems like it's 11 years, but it seems like yesterday I first became a vice convener of the Lifelong Learning Committee. If there was one thing that would give me sleepless nights, was child protection. But I know that when I got to know the team, Sheena, Bill, Jackie, and the others, and Ross, I realised I had no concerns whatsoever. Everything was being looked after, and can't think of a better man to take the post.
Thank you, Councillor Baird. If there are no more comments, do we agree the report? Thank you. I'd like the council to agree to vary the order of business at the moment to take item 13 at this point, prior to item 12. Do you have your agreement? This is the Perth and Kinross Adult Protection Committee biannual report, and be inviting Bill Atkinson back again as independent chair of the Adult Protection Committee.
Thank you for those words and thank you for the introduction, Provost. The Adult Protection Committee is on a slightly different legal footing and is required to produce every 2 years for submission to the Scottish Government a biannual report on the activity of the steps and businesses that are taken to protect vulnerable adults in Perth and Kinross. Responsibility for adult protection is delegated to the Council by the Integrated Joint Board, and this report has also been at the Board's last meeting on the 28th of September. As I said, this is for a 2-year period, and I've only recently taken up post, so I need to acknowledge the contribution of the former Chair, Independent Convener Alec Davidson, who has been the convener of the Adult Protection Committee here in Perth and Kinross since its inception 9 years ago, and to Mary Notman, the lead officer, who has also been a great support over this period. So the report sets out the commitment to continuous improvement and key achievements that have been obtained over the last 2 years, but also recognises, as we've already highlighted in relation to child protection, there's no room for complacency. Indeed, there's a number of improvement actions that we're keen to move forward in over the next year. And it would be my intentions, with your permission and approval, to bring to Council an annual report alongside the Child Protection Committee on the business of adult protection in Perth and Kinross. So I'm happy to take any questions, and I'm joined by Mary Notman if there are any particular details that she could be able to offer too. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Are there any questions on the report? Councillor McGill.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you, Bill, and welcome back. My question really is around, in terms of adult child protection, the disproportionate number of people with learning disabilities who are at risk from an adult protection point of view. And I don't see anything in the report that particularly has any proactive and targeted policies or strategies to address the issues that arise and to help make the people with Down syndrome a little bit less vulnerable, a little bit more protected. So I just wondered what your plans are for the next 2 years in order to try and address some of the issues. And I have a secondary question that's related to that, because when I look at the organisational structure of the adult protection cohort, there is nowhere that I can see in that diagram that really says where the voices of those who are at risk can be heard, either the representatives or the people themselves.
Thank you, Councillor McCall. Any other? Sorry, come back. Sorry.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor, for that question. You're absolutely right that you'll see from the figures that learning disability is one of the main areas of concern around in terms of the referrals that we receive. And we've done various work with bodies representing those adults with learning disabilities over the past, and I think we do need to increase the focus on that particular group. And in terms of how we do that, there is only one way to do that, and that is with the group themselves, recognising, and their carers, recognising that for some of them they'll need support and advocacy to follow that up. You'll see one of the areas for improvement is about how we have a much greater voice or a stronger voice of those who are involved in adult protection through either being those at risk themselves or their carers or representatives. And I think there's a real challenge for us about how we do that, and I would welcome any contributions from anybody in this chamber or indeed elsewhere about how we can take that forward. But it's certainly a focus that's in the improvement plan, and I would be more than happy to stand here next year and the following years and explain in more detail what it is we've done over that period to try to address the issue.
Thank you, Bill. Is there any more questions?
Sorry, can I just ask a
supplementary?
Yes, if I don't mind. It's probably not directly to Bill, it's probably to council officers, and I think I raised a similar question before about commission services and about the quality and standard of care that is provided, because a lot of the instances where adults with learning disabilities are put at risk is due to communication skills and the lack thereof, and the lack of training of the care providers who deal with these people very often in their own home, in isolation on a day-to-day basis. So this is maybe a question more for the council officers to answer as to what provisions can be done through the commissioning process to ensure that there is properly and suitably qualified staff and support workers to perhaps reduce some of the risks that are faced by adults with learning disabilities.
Thank you. Thanks for that. Can I just say I'm at the moment looking at learning disabilities because of the large amounts. The majority of our cases presently are in the care setting, so it's in care homes and care at home or supported, because we do have 4 specialist homes in Perth and Kinross that actually cater for people with learning disabilities. So I think that explains it a bit. But in relation to the training, we offer training in Perth and Kinross that is open to the private voluntary sector for autism and for other sort of specialist actual needs to do that. We have service level agreements with the care home and care at home providers about what training that they have to do. But I do take your point, is that I do think in this area that it does need more targeted, and we have been working with some people to look at it, but I'll certainly bring it up with the contracts team.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pulver.
Thank you, Provost. Hi, Bill. Can I just ask, at 1.7, it says a care home was the location of harm for 56% of people at risk. And I just wondered if you could elaborate on that a bit. And it just seems quite a high figure for adults that are actually supposed to be in a situation where they're cared for.
Yeah, this was in terms of the statistics that we referred to earlier on in the report. As maybe has alluded to, we have, first of all, we have a high number, as many people know, we have a high number of care homes in Perth and Kinross. And we've been very proactive in terms of working with them to identify situations where residents may be at risk for whatever reason. And that has been one of the reasons why we have had more referrals in that area. It's because of the work that we've been doing to encourage them to look carefully at what constitutes an adult protection matter and to refer that to us. And that's why we are seeing some high figures, although it's important to acknowledge those figures in terms of large-scale investigations into residential care homes has gone down. So we're doing less of that last year than we've done previously, but it's still a high number. We are comfortable with that number in the sense that it is a recognition that if there are situations arising in homes that we need to follow up, then we are being informed of that, and we're aware of that, and we are working with them in all sorts of ways. Training is one way, commissioning is another way, to ensure that residents who are in any way at risk from the staff are protected as best we can do.
Thanks very much, Bill.
Okay, Councillor Ribbick.
Thank you, Provost. Just briefly, I'm not sure whether Councillor McCall's second part of your question was answered in respect to representation of the groups that are in, or the representatives that were in, that were receiving the services. And I'd be interested in that, if that's okay.
Thank you. We've actually done a lot of work on this in the last 4 years. When I did my research paper, I actually did it on feedback from service users. We have tried a lot of ways. We have got a carers rep on the actual adult protection who's actually very involved. We have tried different ways of involving service users. I've met with the service user groups across Perth and Kinross. We have tried sending surveys out to everyone on the completion. I've had about 5 returned in about 4 years. And they have all been people who've been supported by independent advocacy who've helped fill that out. So as Bill said, it's one of our priorities for next year to find out ways that we can engage. We have tried a few ways, but they actually haven't been as successful as what we would like.
Thank you. Appreciate the answer.
You've had a fair crack, I think, Councillor McCall. Okay, thanks. Any other questions? If not, ask Councillor Lyle to move the report.
Thank you, Provost. This report captures the main activities of the Adult Protection Committee over the last 2 years. It demonstrates that the committee is becoming more focused on using data to inform decision-making and to evaluating the impact of its work through self-evaluation and audits. There has been good progress in tackling financial harm in partnership with our local banks and in working closely with care home and care at home organisations to ensure that adults at risk from harm are identified and protected. Local protocols for self-neglect and also for hoarding protocols have all been recognised nationally. Protecting vulnerable adults will only be effective through effective collaboration across the wider public protection arena, and is noted that in Agenda 11, Bill Atkinson was successfully appointed in May as independent chair of both the CPC and the APC committees, with a view to securing a greater synergy between both of these committees. Receiving annual updates on adult protection alongside child protection will assist elected members to ensure that Perth Kinross is a safe and a secure environment for the most vulnerable members of our communities. I'm happy to move the report.
Thank you, Councillor Lyle. Can I ask Councillor